So welcome everyone. My name's Anita Thompson of Art Venture Workshops, and I'm here this evening for the Free Library of New Hope and Solebury Library, who have sponsored this program. Very grateful that all of you are here this evening. So just to go over the colors one more time, I'm just going to have those in view. So we've got red, white, and blue, and black, and purple. So it's 5 colors, and I'm using metallic purple. So it's got a shimmer to it. You can kind of see that in my painting here. I just wanted to add a little something extra to the inspired Van Gogh cherry blossom painting, which is what this painting is inspired by. I'm going to quickly show you just a copy of Van Gogh's original cherry blossoms painting. It's so beautiful. And not a lot of people even know about this painting. I don't feel like it always gets the attention it deserves, but it's beautiful. And so we're going to be doing an inspiration from this. So what I did was I took it and had cherry blossoms coming from the top right corner and the bottom left corner. You are welcome to continue adding cherry blossoms in all 4 sides if you like, but I'm going to be doing it in the 2 corners. But I wanted to, let you know that you are absolutely free to interpret it a little differently and add more cherry blossom trees if you like. So with that, we are going to get started. This is a shorter painting because we're basically dealing with, just blending as the background. So just some color, but we'll definitely be working on those skills in order to blend. You do need a cup of water and some paper towels. So we are going to get started with the background. So what we do is we're going to sketch in first our cherry blossoms. So let me grab my other canvas here. And so we're going to sketch in approximately where we would like our cherry blossoms. So again, we're thinking about having these. Let me just adjust this for a second. Excuse my adjusting here. There we go. I think we got it all in the camera. So we're going to start up top, the top left corner. And we're going to start off with a branch. And so what I like to do first with this was I kind of started off, and let me go a little closer so you can see. So we're using our pencil right now, obviously. I'm going to turn that light off so that. Oh, yes, I apologize. This is landscape. Thank you, Debbie. I apologize for not saying that. So basically, you want to turn your canvas to landscape mode. You want your canvas to be wider rather than longer. And so we're going to start off with where we want our branches. And I like to basically use just a line drawing at first. So basically having some branches that are intertwining. Let me make that a little darker for you here. So we're kind of intertwining. We want some branches, obviously, to be a little bit longer. And again, kind of coming off from the left side here. So it can be something as simple as that. Let's add some kind of off the canvas here. And then we obviously want to start making some smaller branches coming from those. You can let this get really complicated or not so complicated. I'm going to leave it like that for now and also come back down to now the bottom right part of my canvas. And I got to go up a little bit so that you can see that corner. So coming up here, oh, Suzanne's coming on in. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here at the bottom. And I'm going to start with my branches. And I want them to be kind of reaching towards the other set of branches here. Welcome, Suzanne. We are just getting started with our cherry blossoms. I'm going to copy the colors in the chat. They're basically red, white, and blue, black, and metallic purple. But if you don't have metallic purple, that's okay. You can use any kind of purple. And we've got 2 brushes that we're using. If you have a third, you can use that too, but basically a bigger flat brush to cover the background. And then a detail brush, round detail brush, in order to do the details. And if you want, you can have a medium to small size flat brush if you want to include that. So right now, what we're doing is we are just creating our vision for where our cherry blossoms will be going. And we're basically using the top right and bottom, or I'm sorry, top left and bottom right corners. And then we are kind of crafting our branches here using first just lines. And then we're going to go back and we're going to make those more 3-dimensional. So now I'm just kind of going back and just adding some more branches and adding more, some more offshoots onto the branches. You can make some that are kind of intertwining. So that's what I've came up with so far. All of these are going to be different. That's the exciting part. Hi, Bonnie. Welcome. We're recording for this evening, and I have the colors we're using in the chat. So take a look in the chat as far as the brushes and also the colors. We're also using an 11 by 14 canvas, but if you don't have that, you can use smaller or larger. And that's quite okay. Okay, so once you have those branches, and we're drawing our branches right now, you then want to make them more 3-dimensional. So basically just going over them and creating 3-dimensional branches by making another line. And you want your lines to be kind of wavy, right? Because our branches are that way. And we're not going to worry about adding our flowers right now. We're going to do that after, when we start painting. So right now, it's really just figuring out where our branches want to be, making them 3-dimensional. And then we're going to start painting. So again, it's kind of a very simple painting in the sense of drawing wise. The other thing is that you don't have to worry about erasing your lines as far as you're making them 3-dimensional, because we're going to be painting over those. So right now, you just want to basically make your branches double the line that you've previously made. At this point, you can also then start to add some more smaller branches if you like, if you don't think you've added enough at this point with your drawing. And then, of course, you can freehand those once we get started as well. You don't have to stick with what you have, which is kind of the fun part of this painting, I think, is it's a little bit more of a freer painting. So I'm still over here just filling out the three-dimensional lines here of each of the branches. And I think there's kind of a beauty even in looking at that. But so once you do that, we are going to start to craft our background color. So our background color is really a combination of our purple and also red, white, and blue. So the other thing is that if you don't end up having a purple, I forgot to mention that, your red and blue will make a purple. And then if you add white, it will lighten up whatever purple color you have. So, but we want to add red and white mixed together as pink also in order to get some of the background color. But our first color is going to be purple. So you want to take your bigger brush that you have, and obviously there's going to be some finagling having to go around the original branches that we created, and that's okay. So we're going to start off with our purple as our background. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see this, mine is very shimmery. It's kind of fun. That was kind of the reason why I picked this originally, because I thought it was sort of fun to be a little more shimmery. But basically what you want to do is we're going to cover the background first with our purple, and then we're going to add the other colors in and blend. So at this point, just sort of filling in your purple is going to take a little bit. I recommend starting off in the two opposite corners where the branches are not there, unless you've covered your paper, or I'm sorry, your canvas with cherry blossom trees in all four corners, then you can start wherever. But if not, you want to start to go in those corners. And then you're going to start to go around your branches kind of quickly, just filling in some color if you're using a larger brush. And then we're going to go back and make the color around those branches right up against our branches. So basically, we're just kind of adding the purple to our canvas right now, not worrying too much about being delicate as far as going around each branch yet, because that is going to come after we add the bigger parts, or I should say, after we add paint to the bigger parts of our canvas. So as you can see here, I'm kind of adding those parts kind of quickly. And you don't want to rinse your brush off because we're going to be using this brush to continue to blend in the other colors for your background. So your first layer is going to be your purple, and you definitely want to blend it a little bit back and forth, and it will dry on you because we're going to be adding at least one other layer. But as soon as you get your base layer, that's a good thing. And then I'm going to put my purple brush aside and pick up my detail brush. So again, at this stage, when you're ready, you can either use a smaller flat brush or your detail brush. So I think for right now, I'm going to pick up my flat brush. And this is where we start to paint in between our branches, making sure that we are going around delicately in order not to paint over as best we can those branches. Now this is sort of a kind of an introductory base layer. As I mentioned, we're going to go back and add more colors so that our background is more than just purple. So you can see that I'm going back and going in between each of those branches and lightly painting. It's definitely a what am I trying to say here? Basically, it's definitely testing your patience with this with this painting. Also, depending on how many branches that you painted. And just take your time and relax as you're doing it. At this stage, you also want to make sure that if you have any details to your branches, for instance, making sure that they're kind of knobby, you want to make sure to make that kind of clear as you're painting. So unless you want your branches to be very straight and not as wavy, you can do that more when we add the black. We're going to be adding, our branches are going to be black and gray. So whatever you don't do with your background as far as kind of filling in the actual branches, you can do a little more of that when you're actually using the black to paint your branches. But I also like to get rather detailed with the background in the sense of helping shape each of those branches. Here again, the fun part is, you can add more branches. So this is what I've got so far. As I continue down into my other section here, And as you can see, I'm kind of going back after I filled in the color and just smoothing out my purple, especially because this metallic purple is very light. So you can see all of my strokes. So if you've got a purple that's happening with, you're probably going to want to add another layer. We're going to be adding another layer anyway as we add more colors, or as we add the red and the blue and white in order to create some lightness in the background so that it's not all just a flat color. And again, so some of your branches may be so thin that you want to switch to your detail brush, which is what I'm doing over here with this side. The other option you can do is to kind of pre-outline your branches and then go back and fill them in with your larger flat brush, or your, if you have a medium to smaller flat brush, you can do that too. I'm finding I made a lot more thinner branches here on the bottom right, so I'm taking my time to outline with my detail brush. And again, when it gets to the final painting, I may decide to add some more smaller branches on there. Maybe not. But again, you have that option. Again, just taking your time. And your canvas should be rather purpley at this stage. It's a good night to paint here in Pennsylvania. I know there are others of you who are from different states, but it is rainy here. A rather rainy day and evening. I feel like it's getting more humid. We actually turned our air off these last, I think we've had it off for like 3 days because it was nice and cool. The evenings have been so nice. But for some reason tonight, I'm definitely getting more humid. We are supposed to have 85 degrees tomorrow, so a bit more of summer as we go along these last few weeks of summer hanging on. I cannot believe that it is the end of August. I feel like I say this more and more being an adult. It's like, where does the time go? Almost there with painting these branches. Hoping all of you are getting there too. This is our first layer of our background. Now I'm just smoothing out some of the paint as I get kind of gloppy. As I'm painting the finer details, but I even like it just at this stage. It's kind of fun. Add another branch here, or I guess filling it in. There we go. Okay. So basically, once you have your first layer, you definitely want to make sure it's smoothed out in the sense of trying to just smooth out some of your strokes. And then we're going to start to add some blue into our corners. Obviously, the corners where we've added our branches. Still kind of smoothing out the first layer. Said I feel like the background takes the longest because of the variety, but not too long. Okay. Just move a little more here, make sure you can all see this. I'm gonna move my light source a little bit because I feel like there's a lot of reflection going on with this purple. So just bear with me as I just sort of adjust my two light sources on either side. I think that's a little better. Yes. Okay. All right. So now that we have the purple, and it's okay if you are still working on your purple. But we want to start adding in our blue into the corners of first where our trees are. I added a little bit down at the bottom here on the left. But what you want to do now is start to add your blue in with your purple. And then you're going to add your purple in at the same time so that you're going to get this purplish blue. Now you can also pre-mix this color on your paper palette here. So what I would do is taking some of my blue and then dipping into my purple and mixing them together to create kind of a little more of a bluish purple. And we want to add that layer on. And basically, you can add this layer on rather quickly since you have already added the first layer. So it should look a little something like this. And I'm going to add more purple. We're also going to be adding some pink. So I'm not worrying about getting to every spot right now in between the branches with this blue. I just kind of want to lay down that color. I do need to give myself a little more light on the right side. Or actually, that's better, turning the light away from it so that you can see the branches a little more. So I'm using I broke out my medium sort of brush. If you don't have that, you can still use your bigger flat brush. So again, just getting that color in for your second layer. And then you can go back and basically grab your detail brush. And what we want to achieve is we want it to be a little bit darker around and in the corners of where the branches meet. But we're going to do that by going over, sort of almost outlining the branches on the background part with our darker color, meaning our blue. So now, once you have your blue down, you can now grab your purple again and go into the middle of your painting for your second layer. So basically what I mean is we've covered the canvas now with our purple first, and then added our blue to in between the branches. And now we want to give some attention to the middle of the canvas, or the sections of the canvas that does not have our branches. And so we're re-adding that purple one more time, just so it can be a little more solid. And then we're going to start our blending. And you can start to go into the bluish part where your branches are, the background. We're not touching the branches, as far as we're not painting on the branches yet. We're just basically now, once we have our canvas painted in purple with the blue on top of the purple, we're now just kind of spreading or layering that color a little bit. But we're also going to add some red as well. And basically, this is meanwhile while everything is wet. So we're going to add streaks of red in the middle of our canvas. So I'm literally taking my brush and adding streaks of red. And then you're going to blend those back and forth. Like so. And then our final part will be adding our white, so that we're then going to add some lightness to the background. And then we finally go back and add a little bit more dark in between our branches. And that's how we create our background. So here again, right now it's looking very red sky. And at this stage, if you're at this stage yet, you basically want to mix some red and white in order to get pink. So mixing another color here. Now it can be a darker pink, because we're going to be using this later on also for our colors for the cherry blossoms. Okay. So the colors that you should have on your canvas are basically your first two layers of the purple, and then your blue, and then adding streaks of red. And then finally, you're going to add more splotches of pink and going in between your branches. So it's going to look very colorful at first, and then we're going to be blending all of this to make it a little more even. But we want all those colors to shine through. So once you add the pink on, I'm going to wash off both of my brushes here so that we can start to get some blending. You want to take a brush that is drier. So basically what I'm doing is I am now rinsing out both of the brushes I have been using, the flat brushes. And drying them off. At this stage, I'm going to get some more water, some fresh water. Right back. Okay, so I have some fresh water, and that's just something I like to do once dealing with some of the, darker colors, the blue and the purple, just washing off my brushes. And now I want to dry my big brush very well on some paper towels on the side. You can hear me kind of banging out the color a little bit and swiping. And then I'm going to take that brush and I'm going to blend. So again, this is a dry brush, or mostly dry. And you want to blend those colors. You still want the blue to be shining through and a bit of purple. But while it's wet, you want to blend those colors, and you're kind of going to get this sort of pinkish, purpley background. And then we're going to add back in a bit of our blue around the branches. But first, we're going to add some white in order to lighten up. So I'm basically, I'll repeat what I did was after adding on all these colors, I rinsed out my bigger flat brush, dried it rather well. It's still a little wet, and you want that because the water activates whatever paint is not dry on your canvas. And then now blending in order to smooth out just a little bit of the color. You don't want it completely smoothed out unless you want to. But this is where you get this nice sort of blended background, but it's very dark right now. And we want to lighten it up with some white. And so at this stage, I'm going to add some more white to the pink so that it's almost like a lighter pink. Start adding some dashes. So it's looking very almost like impressionistic. This is what we're kind of going for. And then you're going to blend again. Still keeping that blue in the surrounding areas. Your paint should be drying, but you should be seeing kind of some layers of all the lovely colors that we've added. So now I'm just quickly blending by holding my brush right about here, kind of lightly, and making the brush kind of stand up as I'm holding it, and then swiping back and forth in order to get that blend. Your paint should be semi-wet. It works best when it's slightly drying, but still wet enough that you're able to blend. And then that's how you get these lovely streaks happening. And then at this stage, this is where you can start to add back in a little bit of some blue, if you like, in the opposite corners where you don't have branches. And so I like to kind of just add a little more darkness by adding back in some of that blue and purple in the corners. Like so. So now it's kind of a dance between adding in some more lighter streaks and some darker streaks in some areas. So basically, I just took that blue and purple again and just made my two opposite corners a little bit darker. But now I'm actually going to add some streaks of white in between with the background in order to lighten it up. So again, I'm using the same brush. And while the paint is wet, I'm working that white into it where it's getting to be a little bit lighter, more of a pinky lavender. And I'm just using a little bit of white on the tip of my brush. So kind of show you. That's a little more than I was using before, but just a little bit because I want to lighten up those areas. And what you can also do at this stage is go in between your branches with this color in order to lighten up. And then we're going to hit inside those branches finally with our blue and maybe your purple too, in order to make it a little bit darker. So again, this should not be a seamlessly blended background unless you would like that. If you would like that, then what you want to do is really concentrate on blending in the colors very well. But what I liked about this one is that the colors, there are, you know, various shades of the colors just from blending white in and then also the red. So you kind of get this smoky look to it. And again, if you want it a little lighter, mine's a little bit darker, so I'm going to start adding a little more. The other thing is you can add white and blue mixed together to get light blue. That is another color that I sort of added in. It's very colorful. You probably thought I was kidding when I said we are going to be really adding a background here. Lots of color. So again, now I'm adding in some blue mixed with white to get like a light blue. I'm leaving my corners sort of my purpley blue, the darker color. And then I'm working my lighter colors into that blue just a little bit so that it looks like it's a little bit blended. But I like that darker, sort of that darker blue area. So you should have a very colorful background so far. And here again, if you want to lighten it up, keep adding some white to your painting in the middle with streaks. I'm adding a little more lighter in the middle as well. Going back and forth with your blending. So the other thing is you can add some water to your brush if your paint is drying out a little bit. You don't want to add too much water to water it down, but you can add a little bit to your brush by just dipping the tip of your brush into your water cup and then going on to your paper plate in order to make sure that water isn't so watery. And then you can blend on your canvas. All right, so I'm at the stage where I now want to go back and start to go a little closer to in between my branches. So I'm going to set aside my bigger brush that I've been using. And I'm going to grab my smaller brush. And this is where I want to add a little more solidarity to in between my branches to make sure my branches stand out a little more. This is also where, if you want, you can add some more lightness in between the branches after you paint right next to them, in between kind of the cracks of the branches. Basically, you're defining the branches by painting the landscape around them. So I'm taking my blue and purple. And if you want, you can just take purple, you can just take blue, whatever you prefer as your darker color. And you're just outlining those branches a little more. And then you want to make sure to blend into your landscape what you already have. Doing a little more purple down on the right rather than blue. And again, this should be sort of a quick, semi-quick kind of painting part, in that you're going back in and just adding some definition to the outside of each of the branches with a little bit of paint. And then you're going to blend one more time. All right, so getting there. Hope you are too. Although it's okay if you aren't. If you're concentrating a little more on the branches or around them, that's okay. I feel like this is really the fun part of starting to define all around the branches. And now I'm going to take some of that I'm going to take some white and purple and a little bit of blue and kind of go in between, or I should say kind of next to my branches as well, in order to blend them a little more. Get that purple in here. Now I'm kind of working with a little bit of blending in into the rest of the sky. And I think I'm going to take my medium kind of brush in order to do that a little bit more. I want a little more purple rather than blue around my branches. So I'm now adding a little bit of purple and blending that in. And now we start to kind of blend into the rest of the background now that we have this kind of these varied paint colors. You now want to start to blend a little bit where you can and where it makes sense. You know, you still want all these colors to be shining through in some way, but as you can see, it's getting a little more solid, not completely, because again, we don't want it to be completely solid, but a little more blended, I should say. So I'm taking that purple, I'm adding it on top of the blue that painted against the branches. And again, it should still be a bit wet so that you're able to blend. If it isn't, you want to add, you can either add a little bit of water, or you can go back and re-add that color on very lightly. So that you get it to blend. Oh yeah, Debbie, your arm should be getting a workout. Absolutely. Lots of blending with this one. Lots of blending in the background. Probably the most we've ever done in any of my painting classes, now that I think about it. This one is definitely the most varied landscape as far as the colors that I've ever taught. I'm hoping that everybody's looks really good. As a matter of fact, I think they are going to look really good. Now, again, this is where you want to decide as you're doing this blending. Do you need some lighter spots? If so, you're going to add either white or white mixed in with like your purple. Some people find it easier to pre-mix that color on your canvas. That way, if you aren't sure how to exactly mix it into the colors you already have in your painting, you're not mixing forever and ever and recreating more colors for yourself. So I would definitely recommend pre-mixing on your paper palette here. I'm doing a bit of that right now with my white and purple to add some lightness to it, to the painting. A little more. I need to add a little bit of water here. My paint's definitely starting to dry up a little bit. I have a fan on, so it's definitely a little drier in here. But I hope you're liking the way your background is coming out so far. This is also where, like I mentioned, you can add, your background can be a little more pink or a little more lavender. Just have fun with it. Or it can even be more of like a, lighter blue, which is what it kind of tends to be a little bit anyway. There's some, because we've mixed our blue in with it and we mix our white. Mine definitely has all of those colors spread out throughout, and I'm sure yours does as well. And you want to do your final blending here. Oops, that was a little too much blue for me. I'm going to add a little more white. There we go. Okay, it's getting there. A little more lightness in this corner here. Working on the final blending areas. Okay. So once you have your background blended, you can then start to mix up your color for your branches. So we're in the final kind of stages of this painting in the next probably 20 minutes. I'm just rinsing out my bigger brush. We don't really use our bigger brush as much at this stage. So you then have the option of using either your medium flat brush, if you have one of those, or your detail brush, your detail round brush. And I do a combination of both, honestly. And mainly our branches are black, but they're also black mixed with, I actually like to mix them a little bit with white so that they're gray in certain areas for lighter. And then some people, I actually thought this was interesting, they mixed purple and black to get more of a plum color on the branches. So you can go either route of having your branches basically black with some gray as your highlights and a little bit of white, or using black and purple. You can also use black and red, and then creating some colorful branches as well. And I'll show you what both of those look like. So I'm going to go in first with my black on the left side. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just carefully painting in my branches. Again, this is where you want to be sure to add sort of the knobby areas of your branches. But at first you can just paint the color. And I'm going to go a little closer at this point so that you can see the detail that I'm doing. I think at this point I'm going to add a little bit of light because it's getting a little bit dark out. So I'm wiggling my brush as I'm painting in order to create some of those knobby areas. And then I'm even going to go back with my smaller brush, just paint in some wiggly parts. But I'm also going to add some white at this point, kind of show you, with some of that gray. And again, you can also mix it. I would recommend mixing it on your palette first. If not, you'll get some chunky branches, and you may not want that in all of the cases. Here again, you can wet your brush and turn it around so that it kind of gets pointy. So here I'm doing the black branches with some gray as well. It's kind of hard to show up on Zoom that it's gray, I realize, because I'm looking in my camera. There we go. That looks a little bit more like gray. I'm going to make this branch a little thicker. In that area. So there is the black branch. And we'll actually show you right next to it, sort of a black and blue. This type of branch is a little more closer to your background. Add a little bit of white. So you might like that it's a little more blending in with your background. And again, this was This one was blue mixed with black, so you get sort of a dark, kind of grayish blue. And then I'm going to create for you a black and red. So again, these are just options that you can do for the colors of your branches. And if you want to make them all colorful, you can do that too. So here is, I didn't mix enough red with this. Let me get a little more. This one's going to look a little more like almost a brownish, like a brick kind of color. Sort of. Let's see. Again, it's a little harder to tell on Zoom. Let me make it a little bit more red here. Okay. So I'm adding some red into this branch. I like to add red a little more to the edges a little bit. So there we have, again, we've got a black branch here that we then take some white mixed with black to get gray. And I didn't really mix that in as well as I did the other ones. Then we've got our blue mixed with black, this branch, and then a little bit of white to get kind of a, almost like a silvery branch. And then this is black and red. And so you have the option of doing those three. And then you can also do a purple one, which would be purple and black, which, you know, again, you're going to get a very similar to what's happening with the other branches. So I'm going to stick with sort of my black. So I'm going to continue doing that, the rest of these. And I wanted to give you those options because they definitely came up the last time we painted, and they look equally as lovely, I think. Okay, so now you should be starting to fill out your branches. This is where I tend to start adding some of the little branches, like more of them than I originally anticipated, just because it's fun to add branches. So the easiest way that I like to add branches is with a medium to small flat brush, and I turn it on the side as I'm painting. And then I touch up a little bit with a round brush or detail brush. Only because for me, it's, for some reason, I'm able to swing the shape of the branches and the twigs easier with this, but some may find it makes your branches too thick. So then you can absolutely use your detail brush. And again, I do go back with my detail brush anyway, especially for sort of the finer edges as you're getting toward the, lighter branch parts. So the other thing that you want to do, if you are attempting to use your medium brush here, in order to not let it get chunky toward the end of your branch, you kind of want that wispiness. You want to lighten up your pressure and almost start to kind of lift your brush up from the painting, from the canvas, in order to kind of get that wispy look. And again, even more so, you can do that more controlled sometimes with your round brush, your pointed round brush. So now I'm going to go back with my pointed round brush and just add some lighter gray sections. And these branches on the knobby areas. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just adding kind of knobby areas by going onto the branches and almost adding like a circle. Taking my brush and kind of going around in a circle almost. Do the same up here. Let me go up a little so you can see my whole painting at this point. And our last part's going to be adding our cherry blossoms on. Just about a minute or two. Kind of made a lot of the knobs as I was creating these branches, kind of wiggling my lines, but now I just want to go back and just make a few more spots a little bit wider. So the other thing you may have happen is that your landscape does not exactly come up against your branch. So you can go back and do a little repainting right up against it. You know, it's difficult because you've already painted it and you have to kind of remix that color or go to that color, hoping that it's still on your palette and it hasn't somehow transformed into another color next to the other one. I've definitely had that happen. Now I'm just kind of touching up around my branches a little bit. And then you can also make branches a little bit thicker, although that doesn't exactly work if they're already kind of thick to the point. Like I'm going back with my purple because I've got a lot of purple surrounding my branches. So I'm just going back and kind of fixing those spots. Oops. Okay, so we create our cherry blossoms with our detail brush. And they are a combination of red and black for the darker ones, for like the buds, red and white to make pink, and then white. So we've got petals flying off, kind of into the breeze, which are white. So I'm gonna, and you can do a little white and purple as well. So first, I kind of like to make some of the petals flying off with a little bit of transparent white. And by transparent, I mean I've added just a little bit of purple to make it a little bit more lavender. And I'm just creating petal shapes that are kind of flying off the trees here. You also want to make them varying thicknesses and how big. You want some to be a little smaller so that it looks like they're further away. I just like to make a few of those kind of scattered in the sky there. And then I like to add my white ones. And basically, so the shape of your blossom is kind of a star shape. Should probably go a little bit closer here. And then sometimes you've got kind of a bud shape that's still on the trees. So we've got two buds right next to each other. I'm going to go closer so you can see. And in the middle of your flower is a darker spot of black and sometimes a little bit of red or red and black. So I'm going in and now I'm just creating some of the white ones on the leaves or on the branches. Sorry about that. So basically, I kind of make it so that I paint each portion very similar to a petal, and then I leave the center of the flower untouched so I can now go back and add the dark parts of it. And you're making these on top of the branches. So I'm just kind of showing you here. So going really delicately in a star shape. So meaning, 3 petals above and then 2 kind of on the bottom. Leaving the center almost like a circle of blankness so that you can go back and add sort of almost like a T shape. So right now I'm just going and creating with white first. And then I like to go back on top of the white to create the other colors, especially while it's still wet. Now you can go and basically pre-mix your paint. And again, you want to add some darker parts, with some red on top. So you can either pre-mix that or you can add it right on top. So I'm going to just take some pink, kind of show you what that looks like. A little bit more red. And I like to kind of create buds and flowers. And then what you can also do is create the very small branches, kind of connecting them after you've drawn the flower, if it's not completely connected. So I'm just going to do one branch here or one side here. Put some white on top of this one. Add a little bit of red. This one. And you can start to fill your branches this way. And I'm going to show you in the middle. Adding some black. When you have the buds, basically, you want to add some black on the edge of where the bud starts. So if you're confused, you can kind of look up and take a look what I mean. So see, I've added, it started out as sort of a teardrop shape, and then I went back and added a little bit of the part of the flower where the bud's coming out of, like so. And you can do that for some of the other flowers too, if you want, although it doesn't work as well with the flowery parts, the cherry blossoms. But then going in the middle here of the cherry blossom, I make like a T and then kind of, a star shape again in the middle. And I'm using black. So I'm just showing that up close, like so. So I'm very curious what everyone's looks like. I know they may not be finished. It's about 8:05, and I'm going to stop the recording and then remove my spotlight. And if you would like to share, would love for you to share. So I'm going to stop the recording.